Sweet. How was Kew Gardens?
It was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. It's definitely one of my happy places on earth.
And was anything in flower, like, or was it just like
Some of
green?
it, but you could
Yeah.
kind of see the daffodils were a bit confused. So some of them were blooming a lot, and then some of them were like, "Oh wait, it's a cold snap again. Why has this happened? What's going on?" So yeah, it's a bit strange. But yeah, it was amazing. I just love it. I just love being around nature. So I'm always a bit, especially in the midst of all of this kind of war and negativity. Obviously, we're all on social media and the news and stuff more often. And I just thought, so I really appreciate you moving the time with the recording, because I just thought it would just, my brain just felt like fuzzy, love, honestly. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but it's just like, oof.
I think it's one of those things, like, we definitely need to protect our mental health more than ever now. And it's also the thing of, like, this is going to sound harsh, and maybe, like, it's more to do with, like, how I was raised, but it's like, they want us to feel exhausted by all of this, and they want us to feel powerless.
Yeah.
We can't afford for that to happen, but we do need to take breaks and recover, recharge, and then get back to it. Like, there's no stopping. Unfortunately, like, we just got to keep at it and, like, protect yourself, because you got to stay in the fight. But
100.
yeah, take a break, get your breath back, drink some water, enjoy nature, whatever you need to do to recharge. Like, get loving from the people around you, innit?
That's that's why you were right, because you were really kind. You were like, should we postpone this? Should we do it another day? But the thing is, because I love you, talking to you, it means that, again, for me, I'm really blessed because I'm not alone in this, because I have someone as amazing as you to talk to. And I was thinking a lot about it, Fabs, when I was walking around. I was like, what exactly is it? And I think it's like, so when you were a kid, our parents raised us to know the difference, like, be the good and bad, know the difference between good and bad. We were brought up on, don't tell lies. That story of the boy who cried wolf. We were all taught all of those things at school, right? And I think amidst all of this stuff, and exactly to your point, it's designed to exhaust us, as Steve Bannon has admitted. It's kind of like everything's upside down, because things are being presented to us as good, which we know are actually bad, and things which are bad are being good are being presented as bad. So case in point, far left wokeism, and so as you said that, I'm like, but wait, isn't woke just being empathetic? So are you just saying, like, being empathetic is not bad? Like, what?
And it, like, literally, like, if we take the definition of woke, if you're awake, that's a good thing, right? Rather than being asleep, right? like, should we be asleep during all this political turmoil? No, we should be woke. We should be awake to what's going on.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's what kind of befuddles my brain. And obviously there's so many parts of it, aren't there? Because there's the propaganda machine, there's the proliferation of the propaganda machine on all of the channels that we look at, so Instagram, TikTok, etc. There's the mainstream media propaganda machine, even the language that's used, the terminology that's used, was it preemptive versus, had it been the other way around, it would have been war, a declaration of war, or look how evil these guys are, like all that kind of stuff, I suppose, is kind of where it is just designed to wear us down. But it does feel a bit sometimes like living in this upside down it just messes with you sometimes, honestly.
I think that's part of it. Like, obviously, we speak outside of the podcast as well. And one of the things that you highlighted is that, like, this has been going on for decades, like this, and it's a repeating cycle of things. And I think that's one of the frustrations. Like, we talk about it, how the education system that we have, I don't know, can't speak to it in any other place in the world, because I've only been in part of the British education system. But certainly when you learn history, which is a compulsory subject, they don't cover any of this, and it's never taught with any sort of context. And so the frustration is that if we were taught from a young age, like what has happened and why there's real meaning and relevance and significance today, so much of this could be avoided. But instead, it's just a repeating cycle, and it's almost like you can almost set your watch to it. Like every sort of 30 years, is going to be some sort of like invasion in the Middle East, whether Iran, Iraq, like Afghanistan. There's going to be something that happens, and it seems so avoidable. Like rather than causing um, a perpetuating cycle, because every time we go in, you create more hatred, and there's more reason for like vengeance from the other side, right? And rather than going in all the time and doing all of this, we could just say, hey, you can work through this and talk through it. You can get around the table. And if we allow like, a generation or two to just heal, rather than always having these generational like wounds that are just passed on from one to the next, right? We could be just a much better society as a whole, as a globe, not just one nation that's benefiting or one nation that is wealthy or one nation that has the most powerful firearms. It's just this the frustration I think we all feel is that the solution is seemingly simple, but we never seem to take it.
Never. And it is that, isn't it, love? Because it's always going to be an endless cycle because, this action, so you just killed, I think they think that it's now, the New York Times is reporting that it was the Americans that actually bombed that school of Israeli children, a little
Yeah.
girls' school. There's 150, I think, kids that were murdered in that school. And that's 150 kids that have parents, that have uncles and aunties, cousins, sisters, brothers that love them. And then we get annoyed because we live in this endless cycle of revenge. So you killed me, I'm going to kill you, then I'm going to kill you, then I'm going to. And that's what, as a kid who obviously grew up on the British side of the Northern Ireland conflict, obviously that had gone on for a long time, and the Troubles were a really horrible period because there was definitely losses on both sides. So the British and the British police acted often with impunity. There were a lot of victims on the side of the Northern Irish, and then similarly, obviously Sinn Féin, they had led bombing campaigns, etc. When it came to the peace deal that Mo Mowlam had arranged, which was obviously incredibly important, essentially what had to happen was that both sides had to say, look, we've both suffered casualties. We have to acknowledge and respect the loss that we've all had. In order to move forward, we have to just start from a place of moving forward. And I think that now, obviously, there's things that may happen now or later, and I don't pretend to know the in-depth nature of this conflict at all, because I would never purport that. But I think that's almost where we would need to get to. And to your point, if every 10 years the Americans insist on restarting some vague war in the Middle East for the sake of separating factions or whatever, if Israel insists on constantly attacking its neighbors, but then being the victim and saying, oh my God, everyone wants to attack me, then the challenge is, like, for every life you take, love, whether that's on the Israeli side or the Palestinian side or beyond, everybody is a loved one. That is somebody else's child. Somebody is loved. They want to seek revenge and vengeance. Yeah, I always think that too. I would say I'm a pacifist, but can I say that confidently if, I don't know, my mum was a murder victim, or you, or, like, could I confidently say, like, oh, I would not want to seek revenge? Like, why did those films always do well, right? Like, everyone's like, yeah, justice is served. And so, yeah, I think it just feels quite tiresome. And I think the challenge, I was thinking yesterday, like, the challenge for me, love, right now is that during the Iraq War, we were fed the narrative, and although 1 million British people protested against it, right, if you remember, right, the government obviously ignored us. Tony Blair's now a war criminal, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, unlike the Second World War, where a lot of that generation have died, the thing is, a lot of the generation that fought and went through the Iraq War are still alive, including people like us who are young enough to still remember the news cycles and things. So now going into this with the same kind of propaganda and lies, it's not going to work. Like we literally remember what happened in 1997, right? Like, and I wonder if that's also part of the challenge as well, right? Because you can't pull the wool over people's eyes like you used to.
I think it's really interesting in the sort of the summing up of what happened in the Gorton and Denton by-election. A lot of people were sort of saying that there's been a shift to these respective parties. The Green Party won like a huge number, and the Reform won a significant number. And the Labour Party and Tories were sort of, a distant third and fourth. And the interesting part about that is that I think it was kind of branded that the parties had shifted, where I think what some people were then saying is that effectively what's happened is that, what was the left wing in Labour has now become the Green Party, and what was the right wing and the Conservatives has now become Reform. The electorate actually hasn't changed. Like, it's still working class people voting for working class values, and then, like, the values of the people haven't changed, but the parties have shifted. They've almost tried to out conservative themselves, and now Reform has come in and said, okay, we're the new Conservative Party, and Labour has almost tried to sort of like move so far to the centre that they left the left, and now we're like, okay, well then the only party on the left is the Green Party. And so it's this sort of frustration where the people still want the values that we've always wanted, and the parties are sort of the parties that tie themselves in a bit of a knot and not knowing how to actually serve us in the way that we actually want. And so it'll be interesting to see how that's corrected. I still think Labour will probably try and correct themselves, but I mean, it's so far away from being what we want at the moment, and that's the sort of the struggle that we're going through.
Yeah, I feel like I read, and again, I need to dig this out, but I feel like I read that some of Keir Starmer's comments, so the British Prime Minister's comments after Gordon and Denton, I think he even mentioned something like, yeah, this is just the far left, not repeated, or to something that said, I'm a little bit like, but you're the Labour Party. It's like, what the hell in a handbasket are you talking about, mate? Like, the whole point of the Labour Party is that it was on the left, and we've had 14 years of a Conservative government that has decimated this country, and the working class and the middle classes have paid the price for it. Now, is it because you are in hock to the bond markets? Is it because you are in hock to the millionaires' donors or whatever that you guys also have? Unfortunately, same problem the Democrats have, by the way, in America as the Republicans. Like, you become so establishment that you're so disconnected from the people. And I do understand, like, I get that when you're in that position of power, it is a different ball game that when you're on the outside throwing stuff in, right? So
Yeah.
Farage has basically built a career for achieving nothing but criticizing everything, right? He was a member of the European Parliament. He got paid quite a lot of money. He was on the Fisheries Committee. He never attended a single meeting. He pretty much just shat on the European Union, which is kind of a funny one, I always think, because which one of us could be so openly against our employer and still be employed? Do you know what I mean?
Great.
And then you kind of got the Labour Party, who kind of came into power and then immediately wanted to be fiscally responsible and ultimately pushing the burden back onto the very people that had kind of suffered for the last 14 years, and then being like, oh, but I just don't understand why people don't get it. And you're like, well, plans need to a certain degree. It's easy for him because he's on the outside, right? So I do empathize. So both Polanski and Farage are on the outside sort of looking in. Kemi Badnoch is just so utterly pointless. I just like, honestly don't even know how they could call themselves an opposition, because I think she's taken the term opposition so literally that if Starmer says A, she says Z.
Yeah.
If he says Z,
Yeah.
she says A. And it's like, you're totally disconnected from what the public are saying, what they're feeling. The fact that she and Reform, by the way, are backing Trump in this illegal war just says everything, because clearly every opinion poll in this country is saying hell's to the no. Do we not want to be involved? And that's it, isn't it, love? Exactly as you say, like, people just, it's not so much that it's the people, but it's the parties that are just not listening to the people.
When you think about like where we are and what we've lived through, from a party political perspective, can you think of a time where there has been a party further to the left than the current Green Party?
I think that it kind of was what Labour were initially when Tony Blair was in power.
New
Do you
Labour.
do you think, love, yeah, New Labour, that was it? Do you remember? Because he came in on a change platform. And I say this as a kid who lived through the benefits of that period. So I always credit where I am today with being lucky enough to grow up in that period, because we had well-funded schools. We had a really well-funded NHS. We didn't have the kind of waiting lists we have right today. We had university education that was largely means tested. So because of our economic situation, I didn't have to pay a huge amount for university. I didn't come out with the massive debts that kids are coming out with today. So to a large part, I think New Labour at the time, before he kind of got all turned around by Bush and all this nonsense, but I feel like that was a time, maybe? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think it's interesting. I think maybe this current Green Party was a little further to the left because it's been so openly saying like we're going after the billionaires. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like, and again, I was definitely a child at the time, so maybe my memory of it is a bit foggy. But I feel like at the time it was like still working within the system, and maybe the economic situation was different enough for Tony Blair and the leadership at the time to sort of say this is how we're going to do it, but things will get better. But whereas now it's like you need to go after the billionaires because there's no way we can fund it any other way, and there's quite. It feels like no political party is going to tax the people to sort of make the changes that are necessary. Understandably, like nobody's going to vote for more taxes, and it just doesn't make sense. But it's like my thing with taxes is that it feels like until we invest in infrastructure and everything that the public needs, things can't improve. And it feels like taxes are the only way to reliably do that. And I don't know what that means for the UK if like that actually happens. I don't know if it just means, we go through some sort of austerity period that, nobody enjoyed, nobody wanted, and nobody felt like they got any value from it. But can't see what the answer is otherwise. I think that's my struggle at the moment.
And I think the thing is, love, like, I wish I had the time to look into the data on it, because I found data on the Office of National Statistics, right? But I have a theory, and I would like caveat it's just a theory.
Right?
That the thing is, like, where we are today, we have an aging population that initially, when the state pension system was set up, people lived, say, like 15 years after retirement. People are now living up to 30 years, anywhere between 20 to 30 years post-retirement. So that's an incredible burden. And effectively what has happened, and this has happened in corporations much earlier, right? So a lot of corporations used to have what they call a final salary pension scheme, right? So essentially whatever your final salary was would then drive your pension. So it was an incredibly generous scheme, but the problem is it became unaffordable. So many companies cancelled them. The government is almost, it's not final salary, but almost expected to maintain the levels of pension, even though circumstances have changed, right? Where we are today, we also have significant advancements in medical tech and technology, right? Pharmaceutical companies have been designing, building. Like one of our friends is a super genius and he is working on trying to solve cancer for children, right? Like there's lots of people that are doing great work. The challenge with it, though, is it's owned by corporations, which means that we have to pay a lot of money in order to be able to access that medication. The good thing is that it makes people live longer, which is great, but it also means that people are living longer, so we have to pay for it. So actually, to me, there's a kind of maelstrom of multiple factors that make this situation that we face today in 2026 very, very different to the same generation of boomers that are talking about how they did everything and they did and they paid. And 1950, 1960 was a very different time to where you are today. So and the complexity and the access and the things that we have as benefit, like whether you think about, even 40 years or 50 years of neoliberalism, the lack of houses being built, social housing sold off by Thatcher, all of these factors have created this sort of perfect storm. And to your point, the only way to fairly access it is through taxation. But asking the working and middle classes who already pay a relatively high proportion of their total wealth is a recipe for disaster, which is why I agree with you. I think the number one thing, and I've noticed that because, as I said, I'm a new Green Party member, but again, very cautiously, because I agree that the 99% have been paying their share for too long, and now the 1% need to do the same thing. But the other things, I'm still a bit like learning the way. Anyway, so I do think it's a very different time now as well. Do you know what I mean? And just trying to maintain the order, maintain the system, and not be honest about what the problem is frustrates me. And also, to a certain extent, I do tell my uncles and my mum and stuff, because they're all of that generation. Like, guys, respectfully, like, you guys are always like complaining about stuff, but you have to think, like, what is the legacy that you're leaving behind? Because you can vote for reform, but none of you are affected by working employment right directives. None of you are affected by minimum wage. You are going to get your pension sorted because you're such a big part of the voting base. You're effectively all you're doing at the moment is voting to protect yourselves. That's it. That's all it is. But everybody else is kind of just being left. And all you're doing is blaming people for buying coffees and taking one Spanish holiday a day, as if that's like, guys, respectfully, nobody's saying that your struggle wasn't real, but I think you also need to open your eyes to the very different kind of struggle that exists today.
So I want to broaden it out, because one of the things I sort of took a look at was kind of what's going on in other parts of Europe. And obviously we've got our friend, the Spanish Prime Minister. Obviously we kind of were at slightly different viewpoints in terms of how he had positioned some of the things he said. Firstly, I think it was on social media ban. We kind of had a slightly different view on that. And then we also kind of had maybe a slightly different view on his position on the UK and the US going into Israel. And what he said was that actually Spain is going to have no part in it whatsoever, and was almost critical of Keir Starmer not having the same stance, because there's people who want good people to do good things who were like, hey, just say we're not going to be involved in this, right? So I took a look at Spain's unemployment rate. I don't know if you want to seen it, or if you've not seen it. Do you want to guess what it might look like? In fact, if I give you some guidance, right? The US unemployment rate is 3.6%, right? That's the US. The UK is at about 4%, right? So not massively different, but still probably higher than we would want it to be. If you look at Italy, France, and Sweden, that's at around 7% unemployment rate. Okay? Do you want to guess, just no prizes, no punishment for wrong answers, where Spain's unemployment rate is?
I'm going to go 5%.
5%. It's actually 12%, right?
Oh my God.
And on the list, so I will share this list later and add it to this edit. But on the list I looked at, and I hope it's accurate because I took it as verbatim, but Spain is between the Ukraine and South Sudan. And I'm like, whoa. So it's one of these things where for me, it feels like we cannot compare what Keir Starmer's doing to what Pedro Sanchez is doing, because they're playing with completely different cards. Like Spain almost
Yeah.
has nothing to lose, and they're still part of the EU, so
Yeah.
it's a single market economy, right? So if the US, if Trump says, "Hey, we hate Spain for what they've said and what they've done, we're going to punish them," what it's a Euro bloc. Whereas we're not part of that, right? We kind of messed up, and now we're so exposed that regardless of what the US do, we're going to always want to have some sort of relationship with them because
Mm.
we can't rely on anyone else. And so, just to add to that, I looked at there was a show fronted by Katya Adler. Um, so she's a British journalist, and it's like episode one of this show where she's kind of going across Italy and Germany and looking at um, the differences in culture in those parts of the world. And one of the things that was highlighted was that because for so long there was almost this peace dividends, um, the German political establishment did not invest in German infrastructure. And so where the Autobahn was meant to be like this, shining example of German engineering, because there's been so little investment in it, it's not been maintained, and there's constantly roadworks on it. And so, I think the Autobahn had like literally no speed limit, and you could just go whatever speed was appropriate. Now it's like just jammed up because there's always roadworks going on. And like there was an example of one of these bridges that had just collapsed. And so now they're having to like either deliberately use explosives to bring down bridges, or they're just
Mhm.
working on all these bridges around the country to make sure that they don't collapse unexpectedly. So all of this has led to things like, the AFD becoming more prominent. It's led to Giorgia Meloni in Italy, where like because the unemployment rate is so low, immigrants are being blamed for like, you know, all of society's ills. And similarly in Spain, you know, President Sanchez is coming up against a lot of pressure because people aren't happy. Like people have no jobs. They're so reliant on tourism. And there's feels like the government has just let them down. And so just for perspective, there's so much going on, not just in the UK, but like around the world where governments have failed their people. It seems to be like just a global symptom at the moment.
But where has it gone though? Because this is my thing with all of this, right? So like what you're describing right now is really very, very similar issues across the whole of the region. I remember reading about a housing crisis as well in South Korea, for example. Japan obviously is struggling as well economically because of very, very low birth rate, aging population, and quite an extreme working culture. So they have very, very long working hours, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge is when you, I guess, when you take a step back and you look at things like the markets, economic activity, stocks, funds, assets, hedge funds, blah, blah, blah. There is considerable amounts of money. And yet there is such a large disconnect between the fact that within these societies that adopted these economic policies, there is so much strife right now and disillusionment and frustration. To me, it feels like the answer is we have allowed this situation where there's just such an uneven balance. There's so much inequality now that the relative burden is not being it's being felt by the majority and not everybody else. So corporations obviously have a big part to play in this as well. But I don't know, and I think that's what Green Party are coming from, right? In terms of their policies as well. But Spain has a wealth tax, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure
They
I've
do,
heard.
it's not working, right? I think that's so again, I've sat and tried to come up with answers to this, and one of the things I
Mhm.
thought about was how the way the world of work has been deregulated, like regulation has been taken out to allow corporations to grow to massive sizes. And essentially what's kind of happened is that we've forgotten that when when someone employs someone else, they have a responsibility to that person. And the scale of that responsibility is kind of met when you're a 100-person business, right? Because what you're doing is making sure that that person has an income and has a steady job. And, the owner of the business probably knows the 100 people they employ. And so there's that connection. So there's the responsibility, but also a certain amount of empathy for the person that you're looking after effectively. But I feel like when you get to, corporation sizes of, 1,000, 10,000, whatever number you want to look at, sort of past that, you're just a figure on a spreadsheet. And the responsibility taken on by the owner, the CEO, doesn't scale in the same way. It hasn't done, right? It should continue to scale with the size of the company. It should go beyond just providing that person with, a fair wage and healthcare, or, those sort of things that you kind of all come to expect. I feel like it needs to be more than that. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe you shouldn't be allowed to grow to that size, because it gets to the point where now you're influencing politics, you're influencing government. It's going so far beyond just a business that you're actually a law unto yourself in some respects, because you can lobby and you can force things through in a way that, a small business just can't. And so you're now reaching a societal level of responsibility, but not giving back to society in the same degree, the same significance. And maybe that's just not something that anyone who cares has looked at, or anyone that has enough power to influence has looked at. But that seems to be a fairly simple thing to sort of address and make that change happen.
Yeah, you were spot on. I really never thought about it like that. Such a great point, because you hear so much from small business owners that are struggling. Because even recently, obviously, the chancellor, increased the national insurance rate, which means the amount of tax that the employer pays is higher. The small businesses are really struggling with that. Smaller hospitality chains are struggling with that because they typically employ people that are more on the minimum wage side. Obviously, minimum wage has increased, etc. And one of our friends owns a small business, and he said he's really struggling with it. But what she didn't do was put a limit in. So if you're a company that has more than 500 employees, you have an increase in employers' national insurance. To your point, like, you're not putting the relative burden on the bigger, you're treating everybody the same, even though the relative contribution they make is not the same. Like, it's so funny when you were talking, love, I was thinking, like, how we had a CFO at a very, very big company that I worked in. And whenever anybody kind of questioned working conditions or a role, his attitude was, well, just leave. We've got a line around the block that's going to replace you.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is it. They don't care, because everybody's so desperate. And this is the thing, I think, like, society has been taken over by corporations. And to me, it's like, it's kind of clear to see if you just take a moment to look at where we are in the world. But because corporations hold so much sway over the lives of us as individuals, it's hard to speak out against it,
That's it. No. And it's even like, recently there's been a lot of talk about the youth unemployment rate, and companies have reduced hiring. So like the big supermarkets and stuff, and not because the minimum wage has been increased, but it was increased by like £1.50 or £2 an hour or something. It wasn't even huge. Then obviously you have the employer's national insurance on top of that. And I'm like, the pushback now is, why did you increase the minimum wage? Which in and of itself is not even a bloody living wage. You're not paying £25 an hour. It was like, what is it now? Like £8, £10 or £11 or something. It's not huge, but instead we're blaming the people that are asking for a fairer wage, and again, only slightly increased. The corporations are now using it as an opportunity to blame the people because they're so greedy they don't want to pay that difference for the benefit of society, to your point, for the benefit of helping the people to have an actual living wage. And I think that's, having lived in America as well, I think that what I know, I always used to find it fascinating with some of my colleagues, because they were really struggling. Some of them maybe were burnt out. They were just treated really badly. And I always used to wonder, like, why did they stay? Like, why not leave? But they can't leave, love, because the company pays for their healthcare. If they leave, the healthcare for them and their families goes away. And that's what I forget, because being in this country, we're still protected. Like, if we lose our job or if anything happens, we can still go to the doctor. We can still get life-saving emergency treatment. We can still get an ambulance, incredible ambulance worker that's going to come and help us. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? There's that ownership structure now and the exploitation, but you sort of feel powerless because you really can't do anything about it. You can, but you feel like you can't do anything about it, essentially.
Like, there was this example, I was listening to a podcast, and this might sound a little bit random, but it was a podcast and I'm talking about the history of face transplants.
Okay.
So it sounds random, okay? But essentially it started out from like, I think like World War One, where there was like a lot of facial reconstruction being done as a result of, being in war. And then it advanced, I think it was in 1995, where the first facial face transplant was done, and essentially the sort of triangle around like the nose, the mouth, the chin was transplanted from one person. Obviously, they had passed and given to this French lady. And so that was the first version. And they were saying that they spoke to a guy in the US who had to have a full face transplant. So like literally his entire face, his hair, everything was transplanted from one person to another. And the reason I give this example is because he was saying that given how new it was, it meant that he often had to call the ambulance. And every time he called the ambulance, it cost him $500. And that blew my mind to think that, like, bro, you got an entirely different face to the one you were born with. And you know that when you need help, it's going to cost you $500 every time. And then this was a guy who said, the cost of having this face transplant, the ongoing cost, because the initial cost was paid for because, the researchers and, medical professionals were sort of really keen to do this. There was charities involved and, they recognized that this was, a worthy cause. But they only paid for the initial cost, not the ongoing costs. So $500 every time you can't bear the pain of the face that is on your head. That's insane. Like, I didn't realize the US system was that bad. And then come to hear also, I think it might have been in the same week where the Dawson's Creek actor passed away.
Yeah.
And obviously he had been battling cancer for a long time, to the point where his family were effectively bankrupt. And that, again, like, I naively thought that if you are the level of celebrity where I might not know your name, but I know of you, I would have thought that you would have enough money to pay for your medical bills, even if they were ongoing, because I thought this guy was super successful, not just like struggling to pay for his health bills. So yeah, whenever people talk about wanting to privatize the NHS, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. You just don't. You've no idea. It's like a private NHS is gonna make everything worse, just so bad. And I'll try and wrap this up because I'm kind of rambling a little bit. But so one of the parents we spoke to, like the dad's a doctor and he runs his GP surgery, and he was saying that the junior doctors are asking for this pay rise, which is understandable. But what's happening is that like the NHS are meant to subsidize the cost of the pay rise, and the GP surgery itself is a business, and so like it has to be profitable. And so you've got these three entities And one is asking for more money. One is saying, I'd like to pay you more, but I can't afford to pay you more. And then you've got sort of like the NHS saying, you know, we don't have any money, but we recognize we're meant to be subsidizing the cost of the doctors you need to employ. And no one has the money to do what they want to do. And so this is really like just messed up triangle being created where everybody is unhappy with everyone. And someone needs to come in and fix that. I don't know how that happens, but maybe that goes back to our point of like corporation taxes. Like that's how we pay for it. Like that's how we do it.
Something no, love, because the thing is, the reality is it is more complicated though. Health is more complicated. We have solved, quote unquote, solved, like vaccinations have taken a lot of the illnesses and diseases that maybe 100 years ago or even 60, 70 years ago people had to deal with, right? But we have new problems, new diseases, like cancer is prolific, right? And we don't have a full solution for cancer. Obviously, people are living longer. As they live longer, they have more complicated health conditions like dementia and like Parkinson's and all these kind of things. So it is naturally going to get more expensive. The challenge is who pays. And I am a fervent believer that the NHS is the correct system because, again, anybody who has been exposed in any way to the American healthcare system knows it ain't the answer. And if anybody's talking about privatization, I'm like, bruh, you really need to check yourself. And literally to Google, what do Americans think about private healthcare or insurance-based healthcare systems? To the point where, you know, that guy, the guy who shot the CEO of United Healthcare, they were actually concerned that they couldn't find a jury that would actually try the guy. Because I think Trevor Noah was talking about this on his podcast or one of his guests. Like, the American healthcare system is hated by so many people across the spectrum that, like, how would you even find somebody that would penalize the guy for? And again, what was so fascinating with that whole case, I know we're totally going off on tangent, by the way, on this, so sorry.
No.
What fascinated me about
the name is Luigi Mangione.
That's it, Mangione. Thank you, love. That's it. And the thing that fascinated, and again, like, nobody's saying that killing someone is right, like, you know, the usual disclaimers. We're not saying that, obviously. What was interesting with it is, unlike other situations, he essentially, as I understand it, he had a back, and he was an athlete, he had a back injury or back condition, and he struggled to get support from the healthcare company. Because for anybody, again, who understands American healthcare, these are insurance companies. So they're private companies. They call it healthcare, but they're private insurance companies, just like any other insurance company, home insurance, car insurance, etc. And what they do is they put these things in place to obviously protect themselves to make money. So at some point, they will stop providing treatment. If you are a cancer survivor, you may get treated to a certain extent the first time round, but then they'll say, oops, sorry, you've hit your lifetime value assistance and now you've got to pay for yourself. All these kind of crazy things. Yeah, it's wild. Anyway, so he essentially was he was in a lot of pain, extremely angry and frustrated. He tried contacting United Healthcare, you know, blah, 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 whatever. He took the extreme action to target the CEO of this company, right? Most people who struggle in these situations would blame the immigrants. And I say it with a little bit of levity, so forgive me, because again, I'm not trying to make light of a man who's died. But that's the normal way, right? Nobody blames the CEOs or the billionaires or the multimillionaires, right? Everybody goes up for the person who's below them. So in some ways, it was such a fascinating case, even to the point, love, where, again, sorry, I forget why we should have talked about this at some point, but I forgot. We just didn't. There's so much happening, but like to the point where, and it's such a fascinating example of the American corporate system. So they issued a reward, right, for anybody who had seen this guy. So somebody from a fast food restaurant had called up and said, "Hey, I think this is the guy. Seen him." They didn't give them the reward money because of a loophole that they found. And you're kind of like, so just so I understand this, this dude just killed the CEO because of some nonsense clause that basically restricted the care that he was able to receive. But you still thought it was okay to shortchange the poor fast food employee, who in America, by the way, basically earned shit, like nothing, out of the reward money on a loophole.
And also the audacity to do that, knowing that it was going to be public. Because now, like, if ever I imagine anyone in the US who sees a reward for turning someone in is going to be like, I'm never going to see that money anyway. So you know what? Go on about your business. In fact, let me buy you a drink because it's a better use of my time and money. It's just crazy.
And
It's so
even like the
crazy.
healthcare CEO, like the insurance companies, the CEOs, their response when this happened was to take their pictures off the website.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I'm like, I would have seen this as like a wake-up call to say, this is rather concerning, but no. So again, yes, the corporations have a lot to answer for. And again, even now, the European Union has fined Meta. I think you mentioned this, didn't you, the other day, or did I read it? Maybe you sent it to me. So Meta have been fined quite a considerable amount of money, which we will put up on here when I find it, because they effectively used a loophole to avoid paying taxes in the European Union. So for those of you who don't know, well, it was historically low, but Ireland essentially are part of the European Union. They had a lower tax rate. So a lot of companies set up corporations, entities in Ireland. So they paid the lower tax rate. So all earnings that were in the European Union effectively got paid for at a low tax rate in Ireland. But anyway, Meta found an additional loophole, which had them set up some kind of company in the Caymans or somewhere, which was an offshore jurisdiction, and the EU essentially going after them for unpaid taxes. But again, just to be clear, this would be the same Meta that calls itself a sales entity, that it has many, many millions of subscribers to its platforms, that is harvesting all of the data that we have and we give and we engage with the platforms to then sell to advertisers to make considerable amounts of money, who are also using the data and our conversations, etc., to train their AI, which they also want to monetize on. But they don't want to pay their fair share of tax to help the society that is helping them.
And Mira, just to like underscore that point, I think a lot of people probably feel like, hey, if Meta want my data, fine, have it. Like my data is not interesting, doesn't mean anything. And it's not the fact that Meta want your individual data. They want the data of everyone. And once you have that, then you have something that is valuable. Then you have something that can produce, I think Meta's worth like $4 trillion now. Like it's in that club, it's in that group of people. And the same with Google, same with Amazon, all of these companies, they make so much money because they can harvest so much data. And data is more valuable than oil at this point, right? So whatever you need to do, whether it's like a VPN, whether it's turning off the microphone so that it's not always listening to you, let's hope that works, because it's not always the case that it does work. But let's at least try it. Right? We gotta take steps, right? Yeah, it's not about your data. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's how many grains of sand do you have a beach? It's like us as individual, we don't mean a lot, but once we all come together, we can make a difference. So do what you can.
Isn't it called enshittification? Isn't there an author or a guy who's called this whole thing enshittification? So what started as, I'm just going to go on Facebook because I can catch up with an old school friend. Oh, I wonder if I could find them, to the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where they're using all of this data they've harvested to now influence a decision in the Brexit election. So they targeted voters through Facebook who were undecided, they thought were undecided or whatever, through their targeting, to then influence the outcome of this fundamentally important election in the UK. So like, I think he's called it enshittification because essentially what started as something that was quote unquote free, that was supposed to be just something that you use, to now where it is today, where they're just making vast amounts of money off of you without you obviously seeing any benefit of it, not even necessarily directly, but just through making a contribution through taxes, to be fair. Even things like love, you know, the ones that get me the most, that I absolutely despise, are Glassdoor. I don't know if you know, you heard of Glassdoor, love, right? So Glassdoor was supposed to be a forum that effectively captured employees' feedback about the companies that they worked for, right? So in some ways, I used to use it because it's kind of a good way to get a quote unquote inside scoop. Obviously, you have to be fair and say, like, most people would post negative reviews, blah blah. Anyway, but now Glassdoor is owned by Google. They don't even allow you to like look at it at the moment. They want your information. Then they want to know what company you work for. They're forcing you to provide a shit ton of stuff just to be able to access a platform that people contributed to for free. The same thing with TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor I used to love because I always use it because I love to read the reviews and then I provide the reviews itself. Again, they've now tried to monetize what was free. People are providing all of this data and information for free, and you are now monetizing the crap out of it because you're a bunch of greedy fuckers. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Honestly. But anyway.
Meerz, we said we were going to do two things. One of which was going to be to sort of show a bit about how the sausage was made. And the other was around green tech. Do you still want to do those things? And which would you like to do first if you do?
Yeah, we could do we could go when the sausage is made.
Okay. So this is interesting to me, and I'm hoping it'll be interesting to our audience. So I think last week we started sharing on social platforms, and that was like a new step for us. I mean, it still feels like early days, but you know, this was relatively new. So we've just done Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. Those are the three social platforms that we've gone on. And of those three, YouTube has definitely been the one that has given us the largest volume of views, which is, I don't know, it's maybe not surprising. But what I wanted to share with you is, and I'm just bringing up the numbers as I'm talking, which is why I'm talking in this weird way, is we shared 3 posts a day over 3 days. So 3 on Tuesday, 3 on Wednesday, 3 on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially that led to 8,000 views in total. And that means that of those videos, 5 have got over 1,000 views.
Wow.
2 of those 5 have got over 1,500. And then there's a couple at like 900 and 600, so on and so forth. So the YouTube Shorts are performing really well. And so we'll definitely continue to do that. I don't know if that sort of leans into your enshiftification point around like people don't want long form content. They just want like really short bits of content. And maybe once people get to know us, we'll earn their attention for a bit longer, you know. It feels like the shorter videos have performed better. And then, I mean, look, if you look at average duration time, the video that's got the most views had a 33-second average duration time. So, like, if we're, I mean, look, that's not to say that, you know, people didn't watch it through to the end, just that, yeah, on average, we only got through to 33 seconds. So that might mean that we start, like, ensuring that if we've got a point to make, we say it in the first 30 seconds of any clip. But then it also might be like, well, we really are only talking to the people that get to the end of the video. Like, those are the people who clearly have found that what we said has resonated with them and stuck through. the last point on YouTube Shorts is that we got, I want to say 10 subscribers. So if you're one of those 10, then from me and Meerz, we love you. You're our new friends. Oh, and actually, I said that was the last point, but it's not. We got a few comments. And let me see if I can just find where the comments are real quick, because I think it might be worth just addressing some of the comments in one of our videos.
Impressive though, because I haven't actually been. I didn't know any of this, so this has been kind of fascinating, like super, super interesting. And while you're looking for that, it is an interesting point of, because one of our good friends, we were having this debate the other day, and I think the thing is, on the 33 seconds, right? Because all of us, we're all the same. There's so much content out there, so you don't really have the time to kind of get through everything. And I think that what often happens is people do distill it to get the reach and the audience and the etc. I think for us, it was never our intention to produce something with the sole aim of getting the most number of views or the most number of subscribers. We wanted to find people like us that were kind of like, oh crap, everything's going into the hell in a handbasket, but they're trying to gaslight us. Are we in the matrix or not? Like, are there other people that feel the same way as us? And to your point, we may not get everybody. And I suspect some of those 10 subscribers might actually be my family. Sorry about that.
Like I said, we love them, right? So.
That's it. But yeah, so it is incredible though. Like, yeah, we just hope that people feel like have some sort of comfort. Like, it's not just me. That was always my dream of this, was to say, like, in this crazy propaganda-led world where good and bad are now inverted and everything seems upside down, it's not just you. Like, we feel the same way.
Yeah. So one of the comments we got, and it's a public comment, but I won't use the person's username.
Okay.
But it was a comment on where you were talking about how America's changed and is not the country that you thought it was growing up, and how disappointed you were. And so their comment was literally, why did you ever think this country was friends with anyone? Did you not pay attention in history? We only ever do shit that serves us. Where's it gone? Even our involvement in world wars was only once it benefited us. Please be so for real. I can't take you get the gist.
I get the gist.
I did leave a reply to that, and the reply was, I promise you, when you're preteen and the US content is 90% of the entertainment industry, inexperience and naivety can make you believe that our cousins across the water are cool guys. Then you grow up and have to wonder if it was all propaganda. But I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, in my wizened old state, I think Fabs and I would completely agree with you that now we see things and we're like, okay. But what you respectfully have to understand is that as kids in the British education system, what we were told was very, very different. And with the greatest respect, I suspect very much so in the American education system. So I give you a case in point, right? I was thinking a lot about this morning, is when we were taught about the civil rights movement at school, Dr. King's movement was presented as the panacea, perfection. Look at what Dr. King achieved, right? Because it was peaceful resistance. It almost didn't matter that Black people were still lynched. It didn't matter that they were beaten at lunch counters. They were constantly arrested by police, but it was peacefully done. So it was done in a way that the oppressor was comfortable with. Then Dr. Malcolm X and the Black Panther movement was always presented to us as like really bad. Like Malcolm X was really bad guy. He was very violent. He was evil. But then when you get older and you start to read things that Malcolm X said, like there's only so far a tree branch can bend before it breaks, then you're a bit like, actually, wait a second. hold on a second. Like, wait, what? Why did they get angry? Is that just because they were sticking up for themselves? Like, Do you know what I mean? And like, same thing, like as a kid, I mean, my dad always used to talk about this, which is honestly, I find incredible. But as a kid, you were never taught that the Palestinians were oppressed. You were taught that the Israelis were oppressed in Israel when you get older. When you talk about the Second World War, the Americans came in, they saved the day in the Second World War. But to this person's point, actually, they were late and it ended up being a bit self-serving. So yes, I understand, but with great, and by the way, same thing for British colonialism. we were pretty much taught about the railways. Ask any single person in this country about India being a colonial country, and everyone will be like, yeah, but the railways, we were taught about the railways. But what we weren't taught is, and I only know this because of Empire Land again, which I read a couple of years ago by Salim Sangera, the great work that's done by William Dalrymple, that the railways were only built to transport resources out of the country back to Britain. So like, again, so yes, perhaps you were more enlightened than us when you were 14, but unfortunately we were not. But I respect the comment and, thank you for leaving a comment on our page, respectfully.
Yeah. And I think that video did like seem to either get shared more by the algorithm or just hit a nerve with people in the sense that like the other comment was, I wish our government wasn't garbage and the people weren't brainwashed by our government. And so clearly a lot of people sort of feel the same way. So it does feel like we are reaching people who have a broader understanding of what we're trying to achieve and feel some sort of connection to how we feel as well. So
and just to say
all
the
that
second comment, if you don't mind, like my friend, we're all in the same boat as you. Trust me, because all of our governments have brainwashed us also for a long time. None of them are perfect. And actually, I hope in one of the other podcasts, I really wanted to talk about what it is to be a politician and whether we would ever consider being a politician as well in the state of the system. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. Shall we talk green tech? And maybe that might be a nice way to end on something positive.
Sounds good.
So one of the things I saw that I found super interesting was this is like, I think like when I first saw it, I thought maybe it was like a fake or maybe it was just like something that was being theorized rather than have actually been put into practice. But essentially it was a massive like it's a turbine, right? It's a wind turbine. But it's been built on a balloon, effectively. So the point being is that, like, we'll add images, otherwise it won't make any sense at all. I don't have the linguistic skills to describe this just through words alone, right? But if you imagine, like, what you were saying is that the wind speeds near the ground are a lot slower and less reliable than the wind speeds sort of like 1,000 feet up, right? And so the higher up you go, the faster wind speed because there's less obstacles. There's nothing really slowing it down. So what the idea was is that if you put 12 turbine blades,
Sorry, just the image I had is just.
right, you've got these 12 blades, right? All spinning and they're mounted on like a massive balloon. Yeah? And so it's like literally enough to float it up into the air. And then the speed allows it to like generate way more energy than it would by the ground. And I think it's still in a prototype stage, right? But I will share this, like there's a whole article on there and perhaps I should have like made one. But to me, I was like, that's freaking amazing. like it makes so much sense in the world because if you imagine the hydrogen balloons, that there's no energy required to keep it at that height, right? And so all it's doing is gathering wind energy and sending it back down. So you obviously have to have a massive cable to allow you to like send that electricity back down to the ground. But there's no cost otherwise, other than your maintenance and so on and so forth. So like really, really impressive idea. So interesting to see where that gets to.
So two things, right? Firstly, the immediate image in my mind whenever you're talking about that is Up. Do you remember the show Up where he lifts his house with a bridge? I'm like, is that what we're picturing right now? And the second thing, love, is I know this is it seems to be an endless debate in this country as well. Is do you think wind turbines are ugly or not?
Do I think they're ugly or not? I don't think they're ugly. I don't have a strong opinion about them, and my feeling is I would rather see wind turbines than coal powered like power stations. I'd rather not see like smoke and all the exhaust from burning fossil fuels go into the air. So yeah, I don't think they're ugly. I don't really spend much time evaluating the aesthetic qualities of turbines. Those.
What is wrong with you? Trump, right in the middle of a war, they're like, oh, but the wind turbines, but you just get the energy from the wind turbines. Like, I actually quite like them, because you remember when we were kids and, oh God, you know that, forget the tree, and you used to have like the little thing that you twist and it would like float in the air. A little bit like, it just reminds me a bit of a fairy, like it kind of, I personally don't have any aversion, but of course, to be fair to people, I live in London, so we don't have that many in our surrounding vicinity, so maybe it's a bit different, but yeah, it's super interesting actually, and I do love that green tech stuff because obviously I'm a bit of a super nerd, and I just feel like because we Brexited, right? We're really struggling economically. We have a highly services based economy, which can largely be replaced by AI, obviously, which is going to be a problem in the future. So I really think green tech is the way to go, not least because we practically need it. So all of my nieces can have a place to live in the future. There's an earth that they can actually live in, to be fair. But it's just fascinating enough because the stuff that people come out with is like, I followed this guy on Instagram, and one thing that he showed was almost like this underwater Hoover that was helping to clear all of the rubbish off the seabed, which I thought was incredibly fascinating. And there was another kid who, I think he was a Chinese kid, that had come up with a way to suck up all of these kind of like plastic, these little plastic baubles and these plastic, microplastics. He had a way of kind of like sucking up the microplastics as well. There was something the other day I want to say, was it in India that I saw? And essentially they were giving out meals for people who were collecting the plastic. Forgive me if I think I've got the country wrong. But again, a great idea because it's cleaning up the environment and people who need food are getting fed as well. So there's kind of like a dual benefit to it as well. So yeah, there's a lot of incredible stuff out there.
I think either you shared that with me or maybe my wife did, but I think I saw the same thing. Yeah. So, and sorry, just my last thing was this idea around, obviously with renewable energy, you need a way to store the energy, right? Because you can't rely on wind to be the same speed. You can't rely on sun to always shine to the same degree every day, right? So on and so forth. And so, one of the things that we're looking at is gravity batteries.
Wait, what?
So essentially what it is, okay, say you have a really sunny day and you produce more energy than you need to use in that day. How do you store that energy, right? And what the way a gravity battery works is that the energy required to lift a weight, a load, is equal to the energy output when it drops, right? So really simple idea. And what they've done is said, okay, we can either use massive weights and tall towers or similar weight, but use mine shafts and we can go down. So there's all these like ideas around like where we've got like all these tower blocks that have gone up and are no longer in use, rather than just destroying them and making that mess. We can use that as a way to store energy and provide energy source for surrounding residential homes and all of that sort of stuff. So it's one of those. I love it because it's one of those ideas that it's kind of like, if you did science, even at GCSE level, you probably can get your head around how that worked, right? It's not overcomplicated. It's just like, you just need to be really good at doing this level of engineering that's required. And again, it doesn't require much by way of rare earth metals or anything like that. A lot of it can be done using freely available materials. So really, really positive green tech.
That's amazing, isn't it? And this is the beauty of humanity for me. Because I think I mentioned on the last episode, like I've always really loved this idea of innovation, which is why I kind of got into tech in the first place. Because I was always fascinated by humans' ability to find a solution to a problem, often in really, really creative ways. And what I'd be curious about, Love, is can AI do the same thing? Because AI is based off of a data set that we've effectively provided, right? Like, even if you think about Claude, if it's going to replace lawyers, it's doing it because the contracts have been drafted by the lawyers, the laws are in place, it can farm all of that data and provide a base level solution. But can AI provide the answer to the climate crisis? Do you know what I mean? Can it say like, hey, listen, I've got this brilliant idea. Why don't we create these gravity batteries? Can it do it? I don't know.
I think it's one of those things where it's like, it would require the right prompt. Do you know what I mean? Like it can't just go and do it. But if we gave it the right questions and the right input, one of the things I was listening to was a podcast around AI designed medicine, and the point being that the majority of medicine made to sort of work in the aggregate. So it doesn't specifically work for the individual, but works for the majority of people. And AI is on the verge of being able to say, okay, we can make medicine specifically for Meerz, specifically for FABs. And so that could take, health outcomes from, an average of 90% to 99%. And obviously that it feels like a relatively small percentage change, but could have massive impact in the long term if we all had access to it, and if it can all be done at a relatively low cost.
How does it do that though, Love?
So it's a case of saying that you would have to first input your specific data. So, give a blood sample so that it understands exactly what the ailment is that I am experiencing and what level of stage that I'm at, and so on and so forth. And then I guess it's a case of understanding enough of the pre-existing data around problem, and then that sort of feedback loop of saying, this is what we produce with the data that we've got in. Let's take another sample and see what progress has been made, how effective it's been, and so on and so forth, and having that level of feedback. And I imagine not too dissimilar to what they were doing when they developed the vaccines during COVID, where because they weren't the sort of standard way of producing things, they were able to produce at a much faster rate than vaccines would normally have been done. So I think it's one of those things where there's been so much negative usage of AI that the positives can almost be just overlooked, and it might be a case where we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But there are massive benefits that can be had by, proper, responsible use of AI.
Because I guess, like I'm a chief skeptic always, because I feel like it's important to really question. Well, for me, in my mind, I'm always questioning it. And the only reason I'm a bit skeptical of is on the individualization, is that within medicine today, we have broad categories, let alone individualization, that are not accounted for. So, for example, there are so many medicines that are not tested on women when they go to trial. There's such a lack of understanding of minority groups and the uniqueness of, is there any uniqueness, by the way, to certain medications in minority groups? So like, it's a well-known fact that in the South Asian community that I've grown up in the UK, there is a higher prevalence when you get older of illnesses like diabetes, heart disease, etc. But I don't feel yet that there's a real clear understanding as to why, except to say that, you know, famines are in the DNA, whatever. So I'm a little bit skeptical, because even in the studies that they have today, they use such small samples, and typically samples that mostly consist of white men, that when you start to get down to the individual level, you have to have enough of a data set collected from other characteristics of person to be able to then say, okay, so based on this person, based on their DNA profile, their blood profile, that we, based on the data that we have, we can then say this should be the reaction, or this should be the individualization. I'm just a little skeptical. And again, I feel like we might need one of our friends on, because he's really an expert, isn't he, on this kind of stuff. So we might need to get him on as a guest to speak from. I'm speaking purely from a place of ignorance, so what the hell do I know? But yeah, so yeah, it'll be interesting. But I do agree with you. I think that there's, even on imaging, right, they're using AI on like breast cancer screenings, on the imagings that they're taking on breast cancer checks and stuff, and the AI has a much more accurate rate, as I understand it, in diagnosis than a human eye does, or something to that effect. So I agree with you. I do think there's definitely going to be benefits of it. But again, I do always like to remind everyone that ultimately AI is human invention. You know, I'm a reflective person, love. So I always like to think back, you know. So I've been
Oh
reviewing
yeah.
the edits on previous videos and stuff. So there's a few different things that I wanted to address. And I can't even remember if we've actually released this video yet, but on the 100% inheritance tax proposal, I would like to make a slight edit for a exclusion for primary family home, provided that it stays in the family, i.e. it's not then immediately sold. So somebody couldn't buy a £5 million house, designate it as their family home, and then sell it straight after the tax calculation is done, for example. So that's one slight caveat, because I do appreciate that there are ties to family homes. There's lots of memories and things. So obviously, if you give everything up in the estate, that may be quite sad for people. So that's one caveat. The second thing is, you did raise the question last week around United Nations. So like, did Trump and Netanyahu fill a gap that the United Nations had left, because they didn't really react when Khomeini was obviously terrorizing the Iranian people? I think, to me, there are two things that can be true. One is, I do agree with you. So you're spot on that the United Nations should have acted. The whole point of having the United Nations was that in these kind of instances where a population was being terrorized, where there was mass casualties, where the actions that he had taken, obviously, to limit dissent, etc., were quite extreme, then the United Nations should have acted earlier to try and bring them to the table, to try and find a way through that protected the Iranian people. I do agree. I don't agree that it left a void, because I think it's a little bit like, I'm such a loser. It's a little bit like a circular reference formula in Excel. So like, so right, the United Nations is not effective at the moment because of Trump and Netanyahu. So the genocide of the Palestinian people has been actioned with zero consequence, and everybody has been too scared to go down this road with them, because Trump is obviously reporting into Netanyahu. So nobody's wanted to tackle it, and the US were a key figure in the UN. Trump has been shitting on the UN to create his other scam, the corruption board of peace, or whatever nonsense it is. So I think that the reason a large part of the reason it's ineffective is because the US over the years, and particularly Israel recently, have acted with such impunity. It has made itself redundant as a body.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's what Carney was saying, right? Mark Carney's brilliant speech early this year, or was it last year? Now I got time is vacuous concept now, but yeah, that's the only. But I was thinking about it, and you're right. You know, the United Nations should have stepped in, I think. But I do struggle right now with the conversations right now on Iran, because it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense to me to intervene to help the Iranian people and then relentlessly bomb Tehran. Because I'm like, sorry, did you build them all bunkers so they're safe? Like, I don't know. Like, how are you keeping these? I mean, you've already killed 150 school kids, which is just so beyond horrific. I just struggle to really understand that. If anything, it would have made more sense to obviously continue with peace talks and bring the Iranian people around the table. But anyway, that's by the way. But yes, it is. And one thing I'd like to address, love, on the next one, and I don't know if you've watched this, but I think you might have been the top person who told me about it, is there's a film called Hypernormalization.
Yeah.
And I initially started to watch it a few months ago, couldn't get into, because I thought it was like old. I thought it was like, oh, must have been done in the 50s or 60s. No, sorry, I completely misunderstood. It was done in 2016, but it's just that the whole thing is stitched together historical videos. And I've only managed to watch an hour, and it's blowing my mind. So to our friend who commented around history and not understanding history, spot on, because I ain't got a clue, mate, honestly, watching this. And I'm kind of like, oh my God, did that really happen? Like, it explains sort of how Assad came to be, obviously the former Syrian leader, how Khomeini kind of came to be, and I've only just got up that part, Soviet Union, blah, blah. So yeah, I definitely would love to discuss that on one of the podcasts, because it's just so fascinating. The whole concept of hypernormalization is so fascinating.
100%. Yeah. I think that will be like our homework for next week. Then we'll go away, watch hypernormalization, come back and discuss it on the next pod.
That would be really funny. And it all came about, right, love? Because this week, so I go into the office, I get on the tube, get my coffee, I get into the office and I text you and I said, you know what is so wild, Fabs, that I'm going on the tube, I'm getting on the train, I'm going to get my coffee. And meanwhile, there's like World War III happening in the Middle East and missiles are flying all over the place. And this psycho, this nutcase who's currently leading America is just like willy-nilly throwing people under the bus. And I'm just like kind of feeling this strange like alternate reality where we're all like just sitting on my Excel looking for circular references while this like crazy stuff's going on. And that's kind of why I got onto this whole I really need to watch that film. So yeah. Anyway. All right, my
Awesome
friend.
to see you, Meerz. I feel like we could continue to record for the rest of the day, but as we've learned, people only watch the first 33 seconds, so the majority of this is not going to be seen.
It's okay. It's hard to know. Like, which bit do you caption up in 33 seconds as well? Just like, I feel like the balloon with the wind turbine, because that's wild. Like, that's wild.
Okay. I'll prioritize that. If anybody has reached the end of this podcast, can I give you an extra special thank you? You have, is that, yeah, you get some of that. Okay. But yeah, until next time. Bye-bye. Stop button. Boom.